My name's Bob Darrow and I am alcoholic. It's good to be here. It's a privilege to do something that I love to do, and that's to talk about something I've fallen in love with, a thing called Alcoholics Anonymous, and my experience with it, the 12 steps, a program that literally saved my life. Just had a spiritual awakening. Before we begin, it's always like that. You just about have the light. You just about got to the light, and then it goes away. You ever notice that? Before we begin, I'd like to start with a little prayer that I found very helpful to me, and I hope it might be helpful to you. And it's a good prayer to start out a weekend like this. And it's simply, Lord, help me to set aside everything I think I know about you, everything I think I know about myself, everything I think I know about others, and everything I think I know about my own recovery, all for a new experience in you, Lord, a new experience in myself, a new experience in my fellows, and a much needed new experience in my own recovery. Amen. I'm here to try to share my experience. Hopefully I'm going to talk to 3 people this weekend. I don't know who you are, but I know you're here. And I want to talk to the guy who, you don't know why, but you haven't been able to get a foothold in Alcoholics Anonymous. And you're like I was for 7.5 years, a chronic relapser who keeps drinking again. And you sit in the middle of rooms full of people who got something you don't have and you don't understand it. And maybe we'll bring a little light to bear on what that's about. And also I want to talk to the person here that's leaving Alcoholics Anonymous and doesn't even know they're leaving. And they're doing it one judgment at a time. And because I've been that guy also. And then there's the person that's here that's probably really entrenched in AA and their home group and they're doing a lot of 12-step work. And maybe you're here because you just do this thing, and hopefully you'll come away from this weekend with a little more sense of usefulness. Some things that you'll be able to use in your attempt to help others and to sponsor people that might be effective. And maybe you'll catch one thing that'll just help you to turn the corner with some guy you've been trying to work with that you can't connect with. And you'll hear that one thing this weekend. And oddly enough, I've done enough of these weekends to know something else, that what you hear and what I say, what you need to hear and what I say might not be the same thing. I've had people come up and thank me for saying things that changed their life, and then they told me what it was, and I realized I didn't even say that. Matter of fact, that's not even my experience. I've had it on some occasions where it's not only didn't I say it, I don't even believe it. But it was what they heard, what they needed to hear, and that's how sometimes AA works. There's something else in this room besides us, and you can count on that. So some of you may not even really know why you're here. Maybe your sponsor just told you you're here to come here, and I bet you by the end of the weekend, your view of what you're going to get out of this weekend will be different than what it is right now. I think it's a lot like this story of this friend of mine who went up to Alaska to hunt bear. And he is obsessed with hunting a bear. He never went bear hunting. And he gets up there and he's tracking this one bear for a while. It's a little brown bear. And he finally gets a bead on him in this clearing. And he shoots this brown bear dead. And he's going over to skin him, and there's a tap on his shoulder, and he turns around, and there's this big black bear. Looks up at this big black bear, and the black bear says, "You killed my cousin. By rights, I ought to kill you. But I'm not going to kill you. I'm going to rape you, and it's going to be bad." Oh, and sure enough, it was bad. And this guy ended up in the hospital, and he couldn't walk for a week. It was horrible. And he's got a resentment. You know how we get. We're going to get even, to get that get even mechanism in here. And he's going to go back there and he's going to get that black bear. If it kills him, he's going to go get that. And he goes to Alaska. Takes him 2 weeks. Stalks that black bear. Finally finds him. Gets a bead on him. Shoots him dead. Goes over. Going to skin him. Tap on his shoulder. Turns around. There's this huge grizzly bear there. The grizzly bear says, "You killed my cousin by rights, so I ought to kill you, but I'm not going to kill you. I'm going to rape you, and it's really going to be bad. And this bear starts mauling him, and it is bad. It's horrible. And he ends up this time in the hospital for 4 weeks. He can't walk. It raised his voice an octave. I mean, it is awful. And he gets out of the hospital, and he's got a resentment. He's got to get that grizzly bear, and he goes back to Alaska, and it takes him a month, and he finally finds that grizzly bear, gets a bead on him, shoots him dead. He's about ready to skin him, and there's a tap on his shoulder. He turns around. There's this huge white polar bear. Polar bear says, "You're not here for the hunting, are you?" Some of you may not be here for what you think you're here for. And that's a saying with the guys I sponsor. When people are telling, when one of the new guys is talking about his little plans and designs, some guy will always chime in and say, "You're not here for the hunting, are you?" Little bit about me. I came to my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous in an institution before I was ever able to take a legal drink. And I was dying of alcoholism, didn't know it. And that was in 1971. From 1971 to 1978, I was in and out of institutions, in and out of Alcoholics Anonymous. And through some of those years, the latter years, I tell you, I've sat in the rooms and I wanted to be sober as badly as anybody I've ever known has wanted to be sober. But there's something about me that I always drink again. And it's a horrible thing. And when I go back to drinking, I can't stop from destroying myself. I'm the guy that Dr. Silkworth talks about in the Doctor's Opinion. He says, he calls us chronic alcoholics. I am a chronic alcoholic. And I have a twofold disease. And one of the things is that once I start drinking, I have an allergic reaction to alcohol. It manifests itself in a phenomenon of craving. When I start drinking, the buzz that I get from alcohol does something to me that it doesn't do to non-alcoholics. And because of that, this effect, I always drink to my own destruction. And what that does to me is when the glow starts to come on in me, I get a different reaction than, say, my sister, who's not an alcoholic. I've watched my sister drink over the years. I've watched her at New Year's Eve. She'll have a glass of champagne, maybe two. On her birthday, she may have one, maybe two glasses of wine. And then when she starts to get the glow and the buzz starts to come on her, in her wiring, the reaction to that is, whoa, whoa. This could get out of control here. Shut it down. And she shuts it down when you're supposed to. She's never gotten out of control. The buzz to her says that. In my wiring, when that glow starts to coming on me, it's like, oh yeah, oh man, I can't get enough. I drank a lot of years, and I can't tell you one moment in all that drinking where I ever sat after drinking for an hour or so at a bar, had the bartender come by and say, "Bob, would you like another one?" I've never once sat there and thought to myself, nah, this is just right. I can't get enough. It's always more and more. And I may throw drugs in the mix. I may do all, but it's always more. And the phenomenon of craving, for me, always manifests itself in a sense of, I want more. I got to get higher. I got to have more of this feeling. I get more and more. And that is, because of that, I can't stop once I start. And then, even more hideous than that, once I've been stopped, as I was many times by going to a hospital or detox or running out of money or getting arrested, or just on one or two occasions I just did some things that were so disgusting and shameful and blackouts that I actually shamed myself into a state of abstinence. And once I've been stopped, no matter how tremendous my resolve is to never drink again, I can't seem to carry it out. For an alcoholic of my type, the type that it talks about in this book, The question is never, with untreated alcoholism, without God's grace and without the steps, the question is never if you're going to drink again. The question is when. It is an inevitability for a guy of my type. I always drink again. I can put it off and put it off and put it off. I can throw stuff at the abyss, the hole inside me that drives me. I can get a new job, a new relationship, buy a Harley Davidson, change cities. I can do a lot of self-gratifying events to put between me and me. But eventually, I run out of, the shine wears off everything, and then the drink's right there. And that's the story of 7.5 years of my life, almost a little over 7 years of my life. And I got to tell you, there were times in that 7 years when I had swore to myself I'll never touch that stuff again, and meant it with every fiber of my being. And the greater I meant it, all it might do is buy me another couple weeks. That's all. Because I'm the guy that when I enter into a state of abstinence, my spirit starts to get sick. And I never understood it. Silkworth talks about it best when he, in the doctor's opinion, when he talks about guys like me who have quit drinking, he says we become restless, irritable, and discontented unless we can again experience that sense of ease and comfort we'd once found in taking a few drinks. Remember the feeling in the early days of your drinking when you've been just frustrated and up to here with life, and that first double shot or first glass of wine or whatever it is, and your whole being just goes, and it's kind of all right. And what would happen to me is that I, no matter how tremendous my resolve is, this restless feelings, and what that really means is that I can never feel settled anywhere, really. I can pretend, and I can kind of act like I am, but I never really feel settled like you ever watch a dog circle a room trying to find a spot to lay down? I'm a dog who can't find its spot. It's like wherever I am, this ain't it. Now, I don't know where it is, but it ain't here. You know what I mean? It's just an aimlessness that I don't really know where it is. Sometimes I think it is. I think if I lived over there, then I go over there. Or if I worked over there. Or if I was with her. And then whenever I go there, after being there for a while, that ain't it either. And it says also irritable. And when I take away alcohol, and I don't take any medicine or anything else to change my spirit, life and people especially irritate me. They rub me the wrong way. I'm the guy that you get me sober and I become just so aware of what's wrong with everybody. You know what I mean? It becomes so clear to me. And I got that sense of urgency to tell them. Because they need to know. They need to know what's wrong with them. And if you're like that, it's a lonely business being sober. And after a while, what happens is I'm just locked up inside of me. Or maybe I start out like that because I've gotten in too many beefs and too much trouble telling people. So I don't say nothing to them. I just think at them. Do you ever think at people? And what happens is eventually that pushes me into such a deep depression that some psychiatrist is diagnosing me as clinically depressed. And I'm not clinically depressed. I'm spiritually depressed. I have the depression of the obsessively, overly self-involved. You know, I'm the guy that when I quit drinking, my spirit starts to suffocate because I get my life and my emotions just on me like this. Like that creature in Alien that attaches itself to your face. You know, I'm just like this. And, you know, I could be in AA, right in the middle of an AA meeting like that. People say, how you doing? Doing okay. Hanging in there. You know, because I'm restless, I'm irritable, and I'm chronically discontent. I don't know why. I live in a world where I look around and people seem fairly satisfied and happy. They're happy over stuff that doesn't do anything for me at all. They're happy over sunsets. You ever been sober with untreated alcoholism? Somebody goes, "Isn't that a beautiful sunset?" And you go, "Yeah." What's next? And there's something about me that the shine wears off of stuff very quickly. And people who are chronically malcontent, we develop cases of the when I. I'm not happy now, but when I get the promotion, when I get married, when I have my own house, when I get some kids, when I get rid of the kids, when I get, whatever the thing is, but it's never now. It's always sometime in the future, I have this hope of being happy. But the truth is, right here, right now, my spirit is suffocating. And I'm smothered by myself. When the book says selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our troubles, I'm telling you, they're not kidding. I smother myself with myself. One of the greatest descriptions of Alcoholics Anonymous, I think, ever written, was written by a non-alcoholic. Back in 1946, when Alcoholics Anonymous was starting to get a lot of notoriety, there was a doctor, Bill Bear, and Dr. Bear was asked to make a report to the AMA on what he thought AA was, because we were getting a lot of press and stuff back then, and nobody really knew what this AA thing was. So Dr. Bear came to a few meetings, talked to a few of us, and he actually wrote a description of Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't think anything better's ever been written, and it's reprinted in a very obscure part of the big book that nobody ever reads. In the very back, in one of the appendixes, in the medical view of alcoholism, Dr. Bear says, this Alcoholics Anonymous, they're not a temperance movement. And that's true, we're not. They're probably in this room. They're probably people that work in the liquor business, or bartenders, or cocktail waitresses. We don't have an issue. We're not trying to blot out alcohol. We're trying to treat alcoholism. He goes on to say we're not crusaders, and that's true for the most part, even though there's a phase some of us go through. What, about 2 or 3 years so we're a little bit like crusaders, but most of us get through that unscathed, and we settle into being sober. We're not reformed drinkers. We're not crusaders. We're people who want to be helpful. And then he starts to really nail us. He says they are people who know that they must never drink. And I'll tell you, for some of us, that knowledge was bought at a dear, dear price. That knowledge was bought out of many, many failures to try to drink like other people. Some of us bought it with everything of any value in our life. We had to give up trying to prove that we could do something we couldn't do. He says they're people who know that they must never drink, and they throw themselves into helping others with similar problems. And in that atmosphere of guys like me, throwing myself into helping others with a similar problem, he says that the alcoholic often overcomes his excessive over-concentration upon himself. And I read that and thought, Dr. Bear, is it that obvious? I didn't know that for 5 years of going to a meeting every day, and to realize that was the problem. The problem is I'm so wrapped up in me that my spirit is being smothered, and I yearn to bust free. And the only thing that when I'm on me like that, and I'm locked up inside of me, and I'm depressed and full of myself and my own worries and anxieties, the only thing that has ever freed me instantaneously is about 5 shots of Jose Cuervo or 5 shots of Jack Daniels, and I could instantly, this thing that was on me would fall off of me. I could come out and play. I could talk to people. After about 7 shots, I loved everybody. Remember that? Remember that feeling of, I love you, man. Remember that? I remember moments in a bar that I used to hang out with the guys I ran around with, were just about 7 or 8 drinks. I'd feel so a part of and so connected to those guys, it would almost bring tears to my eyes. I was so a part of. And then I go back to being sober, and I go back to just being me. The guy who never fit very good. the guy who suffers a loneliness he can't talk about because it doesn't make any sense. Because I can feel that loneliness surrounded by people who care about me. I am restless, irritable, and discontented unless I can again experience that sense of ease and comfort I'd once found in taking a few drinks. And at one time, in my drinking in the early days, for a period of time, alcohol, this will sound silly to some of you, but I believe this is my experience. I think there was a time in my life where alcohol induced a spiritual experience in my life. Now, some people say, that was just an illusion. I'm telling you, I don't think it was. I think there were times in my early days of drinking where alcohol would connect me to some flow of energy or power in this universe, and I would be more than what I am. I can remember in the early days of my drinking where I could just be funny all of a sudden, and I'm not funny. Where I could really talk to people and make sense, and they'd be listening. They liked what I was saying. I remember like 2 or 3 in the morning, and when you're getting deep. Remember deep? 2 and 3 in the cracking the secrets of the universe. I would say things that would blow my mind. I think, whoa, where did that come from? When I was like that, I could shoot pool better than I could ever shoot pool. I could dance, and I can't dance. I can't dance. I tell you. If it wasn't for alcohol, I'd probably be celibate to this day. I don't think I would have ever gone on a date. I'll tell you, I remember in junior high school, I went to this dance, and I'm standing plastered up against the wall, watching everybody dance. With that. You remember that feeling of anxious apartness, like it's all of them, and then there's me, right? Hideous. I hate that feeling, but that's me. And I'm standing up against this wall, and there's this girl out there dancing with this other girl, and I kind of have a crush on her, and I want to ask her to dance, so I'm trying to get up my courage to ask her to dance. I'm standing there, I'm going to ask her. Ooh. No, not this song, not that. Next song, I'm going to ask her to dance. The next song coming. No, next song. And I finally, after about a half hour, screwed myself up to enough courage to cross that long gymnasium, ask her to dance, and she turned me down. And I remember walking back across that 7-mile gymnasium, and everybody in that room is looking at me, and you can hear what they're thinking. Do you ever get that point where you know what people are thinking? You know what they're thinking? They're thinking, what a pathetic loser he is. And you can feel their eyes on you. And I just want to I couldn't even stay in the dance anymore. I had to bolt out of there. I couldn't take it. Later that same year, at another dance, with the power of 151 rum and Coca-Cola, I had a suaveness and a confidence about me, and I could ask anybody to dance. And because of where I came from, and my demeanor, people were saying yes all over the place. And if you did say no, I would walk away and know at depth that you're missing it. Right? You know what I mean? And it would mean nothing to me. Nothing to me. And where does that come from? That is a power that is greater than me. That is connecting me with something that is beyond me. So no wonder every time I sobered up again, my life became periods of doing time between periods of almost connecting. But as the disease of alcoholism progressed, my ability to get that effect from alcohol diminished and diminished and diminished. And the problems got greater and greater and greater. They call it a progressive illness. And really what that means is it's a disease of diminishing returns. In the beginning, tremendous amount of power and effect and fun and ease and comfort. It was awesome. Little bit of problems. And as the years went by, the problems increased and the power and the ease and comfort diminished until I finally entered into a stage of alcoholism that is awful. It's bleak. And that's the stage of alcoholism where now when I drink, I don't come out and play. Now when I drink for oblivion. I drink just to blot it out. And there's no more drinking and shooting pool and talking to the girls and laughing with the guys anymore. Now I drink for oblivion, and sometimes I go on crying jags. Sometimes I fall down. Sometimes I break my hand because I just go crazy. I hate myself and what I've done to the point where I punch a brick wall. I'm not the guy that's having a good time anymore. I'm the guy that often sits in bar rooms throwing down double shots and beers, trying to blot out my consciousness, looking at people that are laughing and having a good time and wondering what's wrong with me. Because I could always remember when that was me. And it ain't me no more. And I can't get back to being like that. And that's for me, the great heartbreak of alcoholism. I think somewhere I could have adjusted to all the great losses in my life, the loss of my family's respect and the loss of the jobs and the relationships and the women that loved me and even the self-respect and doing the shameful things I did. I seem to be able to adjust to that. But after I've gone to as far as I can go and there's nothing left of me, now I can't even get the ease and comfort that I'd once found in taking a few drinks. Now I just drink for oblivion. I just drink to blot it out. And this is a horrible, horrible, horrible phase of alcoholism. It's the phase of alcoholism that will take a guy like me who was never suicidal, who used to make fun of people who would talk about suicide, and bring me to a bridge in 1978 trying to get enough courage to take my own life. Because I was stuck. I couldn't live with it anymore because I can't jumpstart the party. I can't get any ease and comfort. I can't get any relief. And I'm dying here drinking. And I can't live without it either because I'm so restless, irritable, and discontented. And I always go back to it, and I go back and forth, these things of spree and remorse and spree and remorse and spree and remorse. And I'll tell you something, if drinking is awful, and not drinking is awful, suicide will start to look like a good idea to a guy like me, even though I'm not suicidal. One of my great mentors one time said that the alcoholic is in a trap he cannot spring. And that's the hopelessness of the end for a guy like me. And I didn't know that I was dying of alcoholism. I didn't know what was wrong with me. I had tried some of the finest psychiatrists in the world. My father was very politically connected, and because of him, at one time I got in to see some therapists that you couldn't see. I mean, you had to be a movie star to see these guys. Guys that were founders of huge psychological movements. I got to see Albert Ellis for a while, and I was in therapy at the Institute for Rational Living with Ellis and some of his compatriots. You couldn't even see Ellis. Ellis was too much of a big shot. But my dad got me in there. Did some great work with him, but just never touched what was really wrong with me. Because I don't have a psychological problem. I don't have an emotional problem. I don't have a mental problem. I have a spiritual problem that makes me sick mentally and physically. In the book, later on in the book, it says that when the spiritual malady is overcome, we will straighten out mentally and physically. I'm not crazy in my head like I used to. I don't spin with anxiety and stuff like I used to. Alcoholics Anonymous has changed me into a different person. A person who can stay sober comfortably. In 1977, I was in a halfway house sober about as long as I could stand it, probably about 10 or 11 months. That was a long time for me. You know, when you're just not drinking, that 10 months is a long time of doing time, you know, not drinking day in and day out and and I'm depressed all the time. I'm one of those guys that's just, just putting up with it. And I go on a drunk. And I go on a drunk because I have to. I can't stay sober any longer. And I end up off that drunk in a county jail cell, facing 2 years in a state penitentiary for a hit and run DUI in a stolen car. They gave me a phone call And there wasn't a person on the face of the earth left to call. There was nobody left. My parents, who loved me very much, were forced by their own pain and the brutal emotional battering I gave them over the years to go like this, and they wouldn't have anything to do with me. There were no relationships in my life. It's not that I didn't want one. It's just hard to get one going when you're homeless. I mean, it's hard to get a date. I mean, what do you say to some girl? You want to come and watch TV in the TV room at the halfway house. I mean, there's not a lot of panache in that, really. And I don't have any running partners. There's nobody left, and I'm all alone. And I sat in that county jail for about a half a year, waiting to go to trial. And while I was in there, I went to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I tell you, I didn't go for recovery. I went for two reasons. One, people in AA had cigarettes. And two, I knew that there were some of the people in AA had a lot of money and influence and were very successful. And maybe I can find one of them and kind of con him into talking to some judge or getting my bail or something. I'm always shooting angles. I'm that guy. I'm an angle shooter. And I go to this meeting, and I'm sitting in this room waiting for the do-gooders from AA to come in, right? And here comes this guy, Woody. And I tell you, of all the people in Alcoholics Anonymous I had met in the 7 years I was in and out, Woody was the last person I wanted to see. I tell you, Woody was one of those kind of guys that on a good day, when I'm not doing too bad, I can kind of be around him. But this is a really bad day. And I don't want to be around Woody because Woody's one of those happy for everything, grateful, I love everybody, step talking, God's in his life kind of guys, And when you're dying of alcoholism, those people just make me crazy. I mean, because they're everything I'm not. I hate them for being that way. How dare you be happy around me when I'm miserable? I'm that kind of thing. So here comes Woody, and oh God, I want to see him, and here he comes, and oh man. So I go into my spiel, and I shake he comes right up to me. All hand and teeth, right? He comes right up to me and he shakes my hand. How you doing, kid? Looks like you're not doing that good, big smile. Oh man. Oh. So I go into my spiel, and I said, oh, Woody, I'm so sorry I let you and all the guys in AA down. As if I imagined that Alcoholics Anonymous has gone into mourning because I drank again. I'm so sorry I let you guys down. I'm gonna beat this thing. I'm gonna get out of here. Maybe if you could help me, if you know a bail bondsman or a judge or an attorney, I need some help. And I'm gonna get out of here. And I'm going to get into a good halfway house, not like that one that took advantage of me. I'm going to get into a good one, and I'm going to get some of that Voc rehab money the government has for guys with alcoholism. I'm going to go to school. Maybe I'll be a doctor or a lawyer or something. I'm going to make something of myself. I'm going to turn this around. And then he's looking at me kind of funny, like I'm missing something. And I said, and I'm going to go to your meetings and work your stairs and do all that stuff too. And Woody says to me, he looks me right in the eye and he says, kid, who are you trying to kid? You're not going to stay sober. You haven't hit a bottom. You haven't surrendered. And I didn't say nothing to him because I don't like confrontation sober. But in my head, I'm screaming at him. I'm thinking, who are you to say that to me? I don't need that negative thing. I need positive reinforcement here. I don't need this negativity. What do you mean haven't hit a bottom? You don't know nothing about me. Haven't surrendered. Surrendered what? You with your Cadillac and your big house and your good job and your wife and kids. You don't know nothing about me. Surrendered. Surrendered what? There's nothing left of me. A couple years ago, I had a Harley and I had some friends and I had a job. I could have given something up. I don't got nothing now. I didn't say any of that because I didn't want to even talk to him. I sat in that meeting and glared at him through that meeting and didn't hear nothing and just resented him. And I went back to my cell that night and ground away in my head at him. And I want you to know that Woody was absolutely right. Woody saw something in me that I've seen in 1,000 guys in the last little over 26 years. That I see it, I go every week into hospitals and institutions, and I see it in those guys every week. And what Woody saw was he saw a guy that was dying of alcoholism, insisting on being at the helm of his own ship, even though the ship is running into the rocks over and over and over and over again. And I don't know what's doing it to me. When people said in Alcoholics Anonymous, you got to surrender. Surrender what? What? Tell me. They're giving the shirt off my back. What? And nobody could ever tell me. I know what it is today. I couldn't give up the one thing. The one thing that the steps are designed to allow me to surrender. The one thing. Some people can never give it up. Some people die horrible deaths. I've seen many of them. I've seen guys who just couldn't surrender that one thing, and they'll drink themselves until they pass out, and they'll throw up while they're asleep and drown in their own vomit, or they'll put pistols to their head, or they run their motorcycle into an oncoming truck, or they hang themselves in jail cells, or they do the things we do because they can't give up the one thing. And then other guys, they give it up. They surrender it without ever losing much at all. They've never been to jail. They still have $1 million home. They're still making 6 or 7 figures a year. They're doing very fine. But they can give the one thing up. And I almost died because I couldn't give the one thing up. And the one thing up is my judgment. I couldn't give it up. I'm one of those guys, I fit the old adage, you might not always tell an alcoholic, you can always tell an alcoholic, but you can't tell him much. I'm that guy. I'm the I know guy. I'm the guy that listens to nothing except this, the great I am. I'm the guy that can be laying in the gutter and I know what's wrong with everybody around me. I'm the guy that comes into Alcoholics Anonymous and I listen to you and I pick apart what you say and I find fault with it. And rarely, if you ever agree with me, then you're bright and brilliant, and if you don't, you're an idiot. Right? I'm that guy. I can't stop listening to this. And it wasn't until after I'd been sober, sometime in either late 1978 or early 1979, I heard Chuck Chamberlain talk for the first time. And when I heard Chuck talk, I understood what had happened to me on my last drunk. I was actually surrendered by the bottle. I can't take credit for it. I'm incapable of doing it. It just maybe was a gift of God. Maybe it was grace. But for the first time in 7 to 7.5 years, I found myself in a detox sitting in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, as I had sat in meetings, hundreds of meetings. But something was different. And what was different is I wasn't up here running the dialogue over everything people said and picking it apart. For the first time, I sat there and just enough of me was beaten out of me that I sat there and found myself nodding my head and thinking to myself secretly, my God, I am like those people. And I looked at them and I knew that they were like me, and yet they weren't like me anymore. They were laughing and carrying on. The one guy there was a guy there he'd been a homeless guy for 2 years, and at that time he lived on a house on a hill with tennis courts. I never even knew anybody that lived in a house with tennis courts. And he was the guy that was so depressed he tried to drink himself to death. He lived on the streets like a bum. How do you get from where he was to where he is? Something had happened to him. And out of that, these people were like me, but they weren't like me. Something was different about them. And I thought to myself, my God, maybe if I did what they did and followed them around, maybe what happened for them could happen for me. And I didn't know that what had happened is I had given up my judgment, which I didn't know until later as it would return. Dr. Tebow in AA Comes of Age talks about the amazing recuperative powers of the alcoholic ego. The problem is you can surrender and it grows back like a bad tumor. You know what I mean? You could be the guy who knows nothing. Help me. I don't know anything. I'll do whatever you say. And a month later, I know what's wrong with everybody. I know what I need. I know what's wrong with what you're saying. It all comes back. It all comes back. But I was very fortunate in this window of surrenderedness before the ego reasserted itself in my life. I fell into the hands of some activists in Alcoholics Anonymous. And they encouraged me to form some habits that would allow me to survive my disease until I could eventually work these steps. And something would happen to me as a result of these steps. There's an interesting book. I've tried to read it twice. It wasn't until a couple years ago that I was able to read it and it made sense. First time I tried to read it, I couldn't get it. It was just above me. It's a book by William James called The Varieties of Religious Experience. Some of you probably have read it. It's a hard read. It's written in an archaic writing style that's very hard to read. But I struggled through it the last time and I noticed something that was amazing to me. William James did something that had really never been done before. He had, from a scientific point of view, he chronicalized people who had spiritual conversion, born-again religious experiences. And these people that he chronicalized, he found out that these experiences invariably had two things in common. The first thing they had in common is that experience will never happen to you when you're on a roll. You know, you never just got back from Vegas with hitting the megabucks and you're doing well. It always happens to you when you're broken and demoralized and you feel hopeless. Now we all get that. And then the second thing he said that these experiences invariably had in common is that they were transitory experiences, which means that the shine of them invariably wears off and the old behavior always reasserts itself. That's why it's not uncommon in an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting to meet many, many people who have gotten saved, had born-again experiences, and then drank again after that experience. That's a common thing. And when Bill Wilson had his experience in Towns Hospital, and he read Varieties of Religious Experience by William James, I think that Bill must have became afraid that this new thing he had might wear off. And out of that came an inspiration that if he aligned himself with certain spiritual principles and he devoted his life totally to trying to help other people, that maybe he could keep this experience alive. And thus was born Alcoholics Anonymous. Really, that's what we are. As Dr. Bob said, that you can boil this whole thing down to love and service. So in 1978, I come back into Alcoholics Anonymous and I started this journey. And what happened to me is I had this surrender experience in the beginning, and then I started going to 15 and 20 meetings of AA a week. I started sponsoring guys. I had commitments. I was a secretary and later a GSR. And I made a stab at the steps. But my first pass through, I couldn't understand what was in this book. So what I did is I made the mistake that a lot of people in AA make. I go to step studies where they studied the 12 by 12. I tried to listen to what people shared and then figure out what to do. And I missed it because I never really did what was in this book. And at over 4 years of sobriety, I started to suffer from untreated alcoholism, going to 12, 15 meetings a week. And there's a description of what it is to suffer from alcoholism in the 12 by 12. And a guy showed me this and it hit me. It was exactly what was going on within me. And it scared me. And it gave me enough courage to go back through the steps this way, following the book precisely. And my life has never been the same since that time. And here's what this says. It says some people, it's talking about the cleaning house process. Cleaning away the stuff that blocks me from the power, that blocks me from other people. It says, some people are unable to stay sober at all. Others will relapse periodically until they really clean house. And this is the line that got me. It said, even AA old-timers sober for years often pay dearly for skipping this step. See, 4 years sober, I thought I was an old-timer, right? They will tell how they tried to carry the load alone. At that point in my life, everything was very serious. Everything was a big deal. Everything was heavy. I was the guy that, how you doing, Bob? And I'd usually go, hanging in there. I suffered from this heaviness in my life. I even had somebody at one of the AA meetings accuse me of having my sense of humor surgically removed. I mean, there was no laughter in my life. There was nothing funny. And then it goes on to say how much they suffered of irritability. And everybody was starting to bug me. And you know the funny thing about being sick spiritually is I don't know I'm sick. It looks like you are. And you're irritated the hell out of me here. How they suffered from anxiety. And I was the guy that was plagued by worry. I'd have some mornings where I'd just wake up afraid. I almost couldn't get out of bed. It would spin in my head. I became the guy who lives up here. I'm the guy that I go to work and the boss says, come by my office at 3 o'clock and it's 9 o'clock in the morning. I will spend from 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock in my head running scenarios about what he might want to say to me and then what I'll say and then what he'll say and then what I'll say. And I don't know if you live like that. It's awful. I'm suffering from anxiety. And then and remorse. It says I suffer from remorse because what happens when you're irritable, you tell people off and then you feel bad about it. Or maybe I'm in some restaurant and the waitress doesn't know who I am. Right? And I go off on her because she hasn't waited on me quickly enough. And then I storm out of there and I sit in the car and I feel like a piece of crap. I feel about myself the way I would feel about somebody else that acted that way around me. Right? And I'm full of remorse. And depression. And I've always been the type of alcoholic that suffers from depression. And I started having bouts of depression again. And how unconsciously seeking relief, they would sometimes accuse even their best friends of the very character defects they themselves were trying to conceal. That is exactly where I was at. I was dying of alcoholism, sitting in the middle of rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, going to 10 to 15 meetings a week, and I'm dying here. And I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm sponsoring guys that are doing better than me. They're doing better in relationships. They're doing better in employment. They're doing better financially. I don't know what's wrong with me. And I started to go back through this process in the steps. And what I discovered is a couple things. I discovered there was no God. I prayed every morning and every night. There was no God in my life. Not really. I didn't have a conscious contact. It was an unconscious, theoretical contact. It was something out here that was mysterious. There was no actual connection to any power source, any flow in this universe. My spirit was suffering sober. And I started to go through this process, and a couple things. In the book, it tells us some interesting things. And we agnostics, it says that lack of power, that was my dilemma. It doesn't say lack of faith. It doesn't say lack of religion. It doesn't say lack of meetings. It's lack of power. That was our dilemma. We had to find a power by which we could live, and it had to be a power greater than ourselves, obviously. But where and how are we to find that power? Well, that's exactly what this book is about. Its main object is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself, which will solve your problem. Lack of power. The power to change the way I feel. The power to come out and play. The power to get me off of me when I'm on me. The power to have good relationships and to be external. The power to integrate myself and be a part of. The power to take life lightly. I had none of that. I had none of it. And yet I'd sat in meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous for over 4 years. I had a tremendous philosophy of life. I had a lot of beliefs in God. Intellectual beliefs. I could tell you about them at great length. But I was dying. There was no grace in my life. There was no juice. It was just me. And I started to do what it talks about on page 55 of the book. And on page 55 is an amazing 2 paragraphs. On page 55, it tells me exactly where, exactly when, and exactly how I will connect with the juice, with this power that's going to change my life. It says on the second paragraph, it says, actually, we were fooling ourselves, for deep down in every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. Deep down within me. But it says it may be obscured, which means blocked off. It may be obscured by 3 things. It may be obscured by calamity. And I know about calamity. I've lived a life of calamity. I live a life of conflict. I live a life of arguing with life and having it argue back with me. I'm the producer of confusion rather than harmony. I'm the guy that wherever I am, I'm a source of disunity. Father Martin said something that was remarkable one time in one of his talks. He said that you could walk into any business in the country and tell that the people that are alcoholic with untreated alcoholism, and it's not by the alcohol on their breath. He said, look for the people who everybody else walks on eggshells around. And I'm the guy that keeps everybody like this. I'm the guy that people walk on eggshells around because you don't know what my reaction's going to be. You don't know if I'm going to get really withdrawn or if I'm going to treat you like you don't count. You don't know what I'm going to do. You don't know what I'm going to do. So it might be obscured by calamity, and I'm a producer of calamity. It may be obscured by pomp. And pomp's just another word for ego. Is that I get so full of myself and my judgments and the things I want to be right about that there's no room for anything else. I am totally full up to my capacity with me. That's why it's in Alcoholics Anonymous you often hear people refer to the 12 steps as the emptying out process. Spiritual growth is never done by addition. It's always done by subtraction. Is that I have to empty out the things in me that are blocking me from God. You don't study or learn your way into this. This is not an academic. If anything else, it's an unlearning process. As we will see in step 4, it's about dismantling all the things I thought were so and getting rid of some stuff. So I might be obscured by pomp, and then it says by worship of other things. This was a tough detector in my first couple years of sobriety and said to me, worship again? And I said, absolutely not. And the lie detector would have said I was telling the truth. But I worshipped a lot. Didn't even know it. I didn't even know what the word meant. I had an experience. I was ending my first long-term sober relationship. There's nobody on the face of the earth more self-obsessed than an alcoholic ending a relationship. I'm telling you. You can go up to somebody like that and say, I just came from the doctor, I have terminal cancer and 3 weeks to live, and he'll say, you know what else she said, man? I mean, just... Well, that's where I'm at. It's right here. You know what I mean? It's right here. And I go to this late night meeting, And I can't hear nothing in the meeting. I'm so obscured. If God was trying to talk to me through the people in the meeting, I don't even hear what's going on in the meeting. It's like music in a doctor's office, because I'm in my head thinking about what I should say to her, and then what she'd say, and what I'll say, and then I'll say this, and that'll humble her, and she'll realize how wrong she'd been. Right? I get all that stuff going on. And some hideous force has implanted a spring in the back of my neck, because she's not in the meeting. So every time the door to the meeting hall opens, it's like, right? It's like my head's connected to the door handle or something. It's awful. Is that her? No. Okay. Her? No. That's crazy. So naturally, I'm not getting anything out of this meeting at all. And after the meeting, I end up going out to coffee with some guys, and I end up sitting in this coffee shop with this guy from California that was sober 28 years. He was a visitor. And he's a nice man. And I tell you, I started telling him about this relationship. I mean, for 20 or 30 minutes until his eyes have glazed over. I'm telling him about this relationship. And he sat there very patiently and was listening. And then when I was done, he said some things that changed my world. He said to me, "Kid, have you ever thought about the first commandment?" And I'm still have a little bit of prejudices from my childhood. I said, no, I'm not really into that. I'm into AA. He says, yeah, I know. He said, you and I are a lot alike. He said, guys like us, we never get past the thou shalt not. He said, but I think that the 10 Commandments were originally written as statements of spiritual cause and effect. And they lost something as they came down through the Aramaic and into the Latin, etc., etc. They lost something in the translation. He said, the first commandment is, I am the Lord thy God, thou shalt not have false gods before me. He said, I think it's absolutely all right. I think God will let you do anything you want. You can put anything you want between you and God. It's perfectly all right. God still loves you. The problem is, you've just put something between you and God. You've just obscured the light. And he said, when you worship other things, and he said to me that I had never heard this before. He said, worship just means to obsessively turn your consciousness towards. He said, when you worship other things, you're taking all your focus and your energy off of God and helping His kids and putting it on the thing you worship. He said, you want to know what you worship? He said, at the end of your day, make a pie graph of everything you've been thinking of during the day, and the thing that dominates the pie is what you obsessively turn your consciousness towards. And when he said that, I could picture this pie graph with a little sliver for AA, little sliver for work, and the rest of the pie was her. Right? The thing I'm worshiping, I'm obsessively turning my consciousness towards. And no wonder I was desolate. And no wonder I was lost. And so it says that this thing of God that is inside me is obscured by these three things. For faith in a power greater than ourselves and miraculous demonstrations of that power in human lives are facts as old as man himself. We finally saw that faith in some kind of God was a part of our makeup just as much as the feeling we have for a friend. Sometimes we had to search fearlessly. Fearless and searching. It is in the process of clearing away the things between me and God that I find God. I never find God by direct assault. It's a process of subtraction, not attack. That's why, guys, I've had over the years I've sponsored 4 men of clergy, and 2 of them drank themselves to death, weeping because they couldn't connect with God. And these were men that intellectually knew more about God than I would ever know, read the Bible more than I would ever read it in a lifetime. They probably read it more in a month than I would ever read it my whole lifetime. And they died of alcoholism because they were obscured. They were blocked. They were blocked. We found he was as much a fact as we were. We found the great reality, capital letters. And isn't that a beautiful way to reference God? The great reality. In chapter 5, you read it in every meeting, it tells you exactly where you're going to find God. In a place that very few of us ever visit. It says, there is one who has all power, that one is God. May you find him now. Most of us don't even visit now. I mean, even while I'm saying that, some of you are thinking, what's he mean by that? And I can't wait to tell so-and-so that. You're not even here now. I mean, it's like I'm either here in the future or I'm in the past, but I'm very seldom ever now. The great reality, and God is the great reality. God is the great now. Right now. Right now. And deep thinkers, and I can tell by some of your eyes, there's some deep thinkers in here. Deep thinkers are very seldom ever right now. We found the great reality deep down within us. And then it says in the last analysis, after I've looked everywhere else, in the last analysis, it is only there that he may be found. It was so with us. We look a lot of places. We look for power in a lot of places. In sex, in money, in drugs and alcohol, in church, in politics, in influence, in thought. The great illusion I can if I think deeply enough, I can figure stuff out and have influence on life. I look for power everywhere else, but I never look down in here. And I used to sit in meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous in my early sobriety, and I would hear some of the guys that I look back as spiritual giants, guys like Chuck C., talk about the still small voice within, the God that was within him. I would hear old-timers talking about seeking through prayer, meditation, this inward contact, this still small voice, this intuitive thought, letting the God within them work in their life. And I would go inside myself and I don't find God. I find a pack of maniacs running around like a crazy, it's like a lynch mob in there. Just, it's crazy. But I'm obscured. I'm blocked. And in steps 4 through 9 is the unblocking process, where I will unobscure the light. I will take away the things that have blocked me from this power source. I don't have to find God. I just have to move the crap out of the way and God shows up. It's really simple. And that has really been my experience. I think that is why some of these guys that I've known that have been very religious guys and very diligent in their search for God died lost. Because they were seeking God rather than seeking to remove the things inside them that naturally blocked them for God, and so that God would just show up. And they're looking at all the wrong places. And I think the problem is that it seemed like to me at times that God was withholding His grace for me. I remember at times praying fervently for help and feeling lost and not connecting with anything at all, nothing. I remember times begging God for stuff and getting no results. There was a time this is one of the most horrible drunks I ever came off of. I came to in a county jail cell. And I was in Maine, the state of Maine, and I was up there on a geographic because I'd only had one friend left and he was the only person to turn to. And I was staying on his couch, and we got a job together working in this paper mill. And I came to in this jail cell, and I'm sick and I needed a drink, and I don't know why I'm there. I can't remember being arrested. And they came and they got me and they took me into a room, and I thought that I was getting out. I thought my friend was there to bail me out. We were going to have a drink and talk about whatever silly nonsense happened that I got arrested. And this detective starts telling me that I'm there because I took a hunting knife with a blade this long and I opened up my only friend's chest the night before, and he was dying in intensive care. And when he said that, I remember looking down at my blue jeans, and they were purple. And I knew that I sat there in that office, and I knew that that was his blood. And I felt like I was going to start screaming, and if I ever did, I would never stop. And I pushed that down inside of me, and I got out of there, and I went back to my cell, and I fell down on my knees. I'll tell you, I begged whatever was there, don't ever let me drink that stuff again. I got drunk the day I got out. The day I got out. So when I come to Alcoholics Anonymous and I hear people say something that you'll hear in most meetings, they'll say, I'm sober only through God's grace. That was not good news for me, because I was afraid that somehow I had gone too far and I was left out of the loop. That God wasn't helping me, and I begged Him and He wouldn't help me. And my worst nightmare was that I would never measure up to this help that I need, that you good people in AA could get, that I had gone too far. But see, the problem was never my not meriting God's help. The problem was never that I went too far. The problem was I had a broken or obscured or blocked receiver of the grace. The problem was in here. And it all fell together one night when I'm watching this movie. And this is after I started really getting into the steps, and I was starting to develop a conscious contact. And I was starting to see by hindsight a little bit of what had been going on with me. And I'm watching this movie, and it was an old B movie from World War II, an old World War II movie. And it was about the South Pacific. And in the South Pacific, there were so many islands that the United States and the Allied forces didn't have enough troops to station troops on all those islands. There's just too many of them. So what they did is they would often parachute in a guy with some supplies, and he would set up an observation camp. And he would set up and watch for the Japanese fleet, and then report through the radio to our fleet the movements of the fleet. And this movie was about a guy who parachuted into this island in the South Pacific, and when he landed, he started to set up his camp, and the radio that they sent, as he turned it on to get contact with the fleet, somehow something had happened to it in the landing. And he couldn't get anything except static. So he goes about the business of setting up his camp and staking out the island, and he plays with it a little bit every day, but he's not that concerned because there's not anything desperate going on. And then one day, he walks over this sand dune, and there, outside the island, is the whole Japanese fleet, and they're coming his way, and he panics, and he runs back to his camp in a panic, and he's screwing with the antenna and the knobs, and he's shaking the radio. He's doing everything he can do, and he can't get the fleet in, and now he's desperate. And he remembers, he says, there was a manual somewhere. And he looks in the bottom of this duffel bag, he pulls out this radio manual. And he opens it up and he starts to read this manual. And there's a part in there that's talking about the static and the thing and how it got to everything that happened, all the symptoms. And it tells him exactly what to do to repair the manual. In the manual to repair the radio. And the minute he follows the instructions, all of a sudden, there's the fleet. The power had been there all the time. The problem is he had a broken radio. He had a broken receiver. And I think so it is with God. My problem is not that God has ever turned His back on me. Is that I have a damaged receiver. And the best thing God could do was send me out to Alcoholics Anonymous that's designed to repair my receiver. To clear away the things that are blocking me from His grace. And it says only in the last analysis. I'll tell you, I looked everywhere else. Prior to coming to Alcoholics Anonymous, I didn't want to come here. I went to therapy. I went to self-help groups. I tried macrobiotics. I tried vitamins. I working out. I did everything I could do. I did primal screaming where I'd lay on the floor and kick my hands and feet and yell, "Mommy, Daddy." I tried hypnotherapy. I was regressed back into my childhood. I tried everything I could try, but I don't want to try AA. And even after coming here, I tried everything in the rooms for relief except these steps. Everything. I tried relationships. I tried changing jobs. I tried buying stuff. I tried going to 20 meetings a week. I tried being a GSR and a DCM and an area officer. And not that there's anything wrong with any of that stuff. It's just not this. It's just not this. See, I don't know what it is about me. I'm the kind of guy that read somewhere that jogging's good for you. Then I break my leg and so I try jogging for the break. It's a good answer, wrong problem. Right? And that's why I can't manage my own life. So I'm doing everything in Alcoholics Anonymous and everything in life prior to AA except this. And then I finally did this. I read a story in early sobriety that it was a true account of something that had happened in South Africa in the 1800s. And when I read this story, it blew my mind. Because it was exactly it was me. And the story was about this guy who inherited this ranch in South Africa. And he inherited this ranch at a time when there were people discovering diamonds, and the diamond boom was starting in South Africa. And there were people that were literally overnight becoming Bill Gates, Rockefeller kind of rich. I mean, big time money overnight. And this guy who had this nice ranch that he would have been able to make a nice living for him and his family off of, the more he heard about these people striking it rich, the more dissatisfied he became with his own life. And finally, one day he couldn't take it. He sold his ranch, took the money, put it into equipment, went out into the bush, obsessed with striking it rich. He's going to find diamonds. And he went out there and he spent his whole life out there and he never did strike it rich. And he died old and bitter and alone. A broken man. And it came to pass that the ranch he sold to these developers. And one day they're moving some rocks and stuff out of the way. And they discovered these strange looking rocks. They'd never seen them. And they took them to this assay office and they found out they were diamonds. As a matter of fact, this ranch turned out to be the largest diamond deposit ever recorded on the face of the earth. It is to this, and these guys became almost overnight some of the richest men in the world. And they're sitting around one day and they're forming this new corporation that's designed to mine and cut and market and distribute these diamonds throughout the world. And the one guy says to the other, "What should we name our company?" And the guy says, "I don't know." And the guy says, "Hey, why don't we name it after that poor guy who died in the bush that we bought this ranch from?" And what was his name? Wasn't his name De Beers? And they named the company De Beers, which to this day is one of the largest marketers of diamonds in the world. And I read that story and I thought to myself, I'm that idiot. I'm looking everywhere out here there is to look. I'm looking everywhere there is to look. And the answer is always right in front of me. And I can't see it. Because I got a judgment about what the answer should look like. And I can't see it. Let's go for a couple more minutes. We're supposed to go tonight until 9:30. Do you want to take a break or do you want to push through? Break? Let's take a 5-minute break. My name's Bob Darrow and I'm an alcoholic. Got a bad case. So, we're blocked. We live in a state of isolation. And we're going to attempt to clear away the things that block me from God. And it starts really with a decision in step 3. A decision that I made in early sobriety, and I did what it said in the book. I thought I was doing it, and I had no idea what I was doing. And I want to go through this part of the book on page 60 through 63, and we'll talk a little bit about what it's talking about here. And this has become one of the more important parts of the big book to me. When I found myself in this part of the book, then all of a sudden the rest of the program made more sense. One of the things I do with the guys I sponsor is I have them take this part of the book and take a pencil and go through it, and everywhere there's a plural pronoun, I have them cross it out and put a singular pronoun. Make it about them. And when you do that, it reads different. The middle of page 60, it says, our description of the alcoholic, and that's the doctor's opinion, chapter 3 and page 20 and 21. Our description of the alcoholic, the chapter to the agnostic, which we just touched on a few points in a few places in that just last session. Our personal adventures, before and after, make clear three pertinent ideas. A, that I was an alcoholic, and I could not manage my own life. I think that I had an illusion when I got here that the second half of step 1 meant when drinking. I could admit that I was powerless over alcohol, and my life had become, when I was drinking, unmanageable. But now that I'm sober, let me at it. Right? And if you secretly think that you manage pretty well sober, well then, really, what's the use of trying to find a new manager, really? Why? You don't need one. Just go do it. But some of us crash and burn in sobriety. There used to be something you'd hear talked about years ago that you don't hear that much anymore, called the second surrender. That we come to Alcoholics Anonymous and we are surrendered by the bag and the bottle, and then in sobriety we are surrendered by life itself. At our absolute inability to fix ourselves and wrest happiness and satisfaction out of our life sober through our very, very best efforts. It's never enough. We become the guys that are chronically restless, irritable, and discontent. Never really happy. And could not manage my own life, drunk or sober. B, that probably no human power could have relieved my alcoholism. And C, that God could and would if He were sought. Being convinced of those three propositions, we were at step 3. I've had 2 minor problems with step 3. Step 1 and step 2. But once I really got step 1 and step 2, step 3 is automatic. The word decision comes from a Latin word, scisere, meaning to cut. It's the same root word as the word incision when a surgeon cuts into a patient. The word decision means to cut away. If the ABCs are true, which is really the essence of step 1 and step 2, if then really you've cut away all your alternatives. There is either a power greater than yourself that you're going to turn it over to, or you're screwed. Basically, you're screwed. When I was early sobriety, before I was really ready for much of any of this, I wasn't ready for too much more than going to some meetings. I hadn't really worked step 3 or 4 yet. I was praying reluctantly, but I was going through the motions. I didn't really believe in God yet. A guy said to me, he said, "Bob, you're going to have to do step 3." And I said, "I can't do step 3. I don't really believe in God." He said, "You don't have to believe in God to do step 3. I said, "Yes, you do. It says right there on the wall, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him." I don't understand God. I don't even know if there is a God. There might be. I don't know. But the truth is, I don't really know. I can't do that. He says, "Listen, kid," he says, if you will turn your will and your life over to this chair, I guarantee you an instant miracle. So, being a wise guy, I said, "Yeah, okay, I turn my will and my life over to the chair. What's the miracle?" He says, "The miracle is your life's no longer in the hands of an idiot." When he said that, I didn't even get mad. I just thought, well, that'd be right. Because if you'd have followed me around with a Polaroid camera and took a picture of me every time I'm in trouble, whether it's trouble within me, that kind of conflict, you feel like you're dying inside trouble, or trouble outside of me, like I'm getting arrested or losing another job or whatever the deal is, there's one thing in common in every picture, and it's not alcohol. The thing in common in every picture is me. I am the common denominator. I am the source of all my conflict and separation and problems. I am the common denominator. I'm the guy.